What kind of emperor would murder the woman he loved most, and then try to bring her back in the most horrifying way imaginable? This is not myth, not fiction. This is the true, chilling story of Rome's most infamous ruler, Nero. Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. The name itself echoed through Rome. Crowned emperor at just 16 years old, in the year 54 AD, he became the fifth ruler of the Roman Empire. At first, Rome hoped for a golden age, but what they got was something far darker. Nero was unlike any emperor before him. Instead of military glory, he chased music, theatre and performance. He sang on stage like a common entertainer. He forced senators and nobles to sit through hours of his plays. To the Roman elite, this was humiliating. Emperors were supposed to conquer lands, not strum lyres, and then came the fire. In 64 AD, a catastrophic blaze consumed Rome for days. Rumors spread that Nero himself had ordered it so he could rebuild the city in his vision. Some claimed he stood on a rooftop, watching the flames while singing. Nero denied it, but the suspicion never left. To save himself, he blamed an unpopular group, the Christians, and so began one of the earliest waves of Christian persecution in history. This was the Emperor Rome now feared, theatrical, cruel, and unrelenting. Among all the chaos stood one woman, Poppaea Sabina, beautiful, ambitious, and calculating. She was not just a wife, she was a queen of influence. Poppaea had climbed her way into Nero's life with charm and power, leaving rivals crushed behind her. To Nero, she was more than an empress, she was his obsession. Her beauty was celebrated, her presence intoxicating, but obsession is a dangerous thing. One day that obsession turned violent. Ancient sources say it happened in 65 AD. During an argument, Nero's rage boiled over. Some accounts whisper that he kicked Poppaea while she was pregnant, ending both her life and the life of his unborn child. Others claim it was not rage but neglect, that her death was caused by Nero's reckless temper. But whatever the truth, Rome's beloved empress was gone, and with her death, something inside Nero broke. But for Nero, death was not the end. He would not let go, and what he did next shocked all of Rome. Poppaea's death should have ended Nero's obsession, but it only twisted into something darker. The emperor could not accept that she was gone. Night after night he mourned her, but his grief was not love, it was possession. For Nero, Poppaea was not a memory to cherish, she was something to recreate, a figure he could build again, no matter how unnatural the act. And so began his search, not for a new wife, not for a new love, but for someone he could transform into Poppaea herself. And then Nero found him. A boy named Sporus, a young slave, barely a man. He was delicate, fragile, with soft features that to Nero's mind resembled Poppaea. To others, Sporus was nothing, a servant, powerless, forgettable. But to Nero, he was a canvas, a chance to carve out his lost queen once more. But Sporus was not chosen for who he was. He was chosen for what Nero could turn him into. And so, the emperor commanded the unthinkable. Sporus was seized, and under Nero's order he was castrated, his body mutilated, his future destroyed. One cruel act that robbed him of his identity forever. But Nero did not stop there. He dressed Sporus in the finest robes once worn by Poppaea. He painted his face, styled his hair, and forced him to walk, to speak, to behave as though he was Poppaea herself. Every gesture, every glance, every smile, shaped to imitate the dead empress. Sporus was no longer a boy. He was no longer even himself. He had become a shadow, a living ghost of Nero's obsession. And then came the final act. Nero staged a wedding, not in secret but in front of the Roman elite. The Emperor of Rome dressed Sporus in a bridal veil. He led him down the aisle as if he were Poppaea returned from the grave. The people of Rome watched in disbelief. The senators, the nobles, the generals, all forced to clap, to cheer, to bow before this twisted spectacle. Behind closed doors they whispered, mocked and feared, but no one dared oppose him. To Nero this was not madness, it was theatre, the grandest performance of his life. And Sporus? He was the star of a nightmare he could never escape. Rome did not witness a wedding that day. Rome witnessed the darkest theatre performance in its history. But even the mightiest throne cannot stand forever. Nero's empire, once filled with music, luxury and terror, began to crumble. The provinces rose in rebellion. The generals who once swore loyalty now turned their armies against him. And in Rome, the Senate made its move. The men who had once bowed before Nero's twisted theatre now declared him a public enemy. The Emperor of Rome was no longer a god. He was a fugitive, abandoned by allies, deserted by his guards. Nero fled the city in disguise. The man who once commanded the world now trembled like a hunted criminal. And when capture became inevitable, Nero chose death. In June of 68 AD, he pressed a dagger to his throat and whispered his final words, "What an artist dies in me." With that, Rome's most infamous emperor was gone, but his shadow still lingered. For Sporus, Nero's death did not bring freedom. Instead, his nightmare continued. He was claimed by Nero's successor, Emperor Otho, the very man once married to Poppaea before Nero stole her, and in a cruel twist of fate, Otho forced Sporus to play the same role, the imitation of the dead empress. Sporus lived as a reflection, a ghost, a puppet of others' desires. He was humiliated, paraded, and stripped of all identity. To the world, he was not Sporus the boy. He was Poppaea reborn, a title that was his curse. But there are limits to what the human soul can endure, and in the end, Sporus chose the only escape left to him. He took his own life, a tragic ending to a life stolen by power. This was not just the story of a cruel emperor. It was the story of how power, unchecked and absolute, devours everything: love, innocence, even humanity itself. When power has no limits, humanity dies first. And Nero, he became not just a man in history, but a warning carved into time, a symbol of how absolute power doesn't simply corrupt, it destroys everything around it.